name is Victoria Sterling, and 3 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. At 28, I was a successful marketing executive at Henderson & Associates in downtown Chicago, living in a beautiful penthouse that overlooked Lake Michigan. My fiancé, Marcus Wellington, was a prominent real estate developer who owned half the luxury condos in the Gold Coast district. We were Chicago's golden couple, at least according to the society pages. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Our wedding was supposed to be the event of the season. 400 guests, the Palmer House Ballroom, a dress that cost more than most people's cars. I'd spent 18 months planning every detail, from the imported Italian roses to the 12-piece orchestra. Marcus seemed happy to let me handle everything, always saying he trusted my exquisite taste. But there were signs I chose to ignore. Marcus had been working late more frequently, taking mysterious phone calls that made him step out of the room. When I'd ask about his day, his answers became vague, distracted. I told myself it was just pre-wedding stress, combined with his latest development project, a luxury resort in Wisconsin that was consuming most of his time. The first real red flag came 6 weeks before our wedding. I'd gone to Marcus's estate in Winnetka to discuss final catering numbers with him. The house was a sprawling Tudor-style mansion that had been in his family for 3 generations. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car, a modest Honda Civic that seemed out of place among the usual luxury vehicles. Inside, I found Marcus in his study with Elena Rodriguez, our live-in housekeeper. They were sitting closer than necessary, poring over what looked like medical documents. When I walked in, they both jumped apart like teenagers caught necking. "Victoria!" Marcus stood up quickly, his face flushed. "I didn't expect you so early." Elena, a petite woman in her mid-20s with dark hair and striking features, mumbled something about needing to finish the laundry and hurried out. She'd been working for Marcus for about a year, and I'd always found her professional but distant. Now she wouldn't meet my eyes. "What was that about?" I asked, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "Oh, Elena was just asking about time off. You know how it is." Marcus's laugh sounded forced. "She's been working so hard lately." I let it slide, but the memory nagged at me. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more strange behavior. Marcus would get text messages at odd hours and step away to answer them. He'd come home with scratches on his hands that he claimed were from yard work, though we employed a full landscaping crew. Most telling of all, he'd started making excuses to avoid physical intimacy, claiming he was saving his energy for our honeymoon. The truth finally came crashing down exactly 2 weeks before our wedding. I'd taken a half-day off work to handle some last-minute details with the florist and caterer. Around 3 in the afternoon, I decided to surprise Marcus with lunch from his favorite Italian place in Little Italy. The drive to Winnetka took 40 minutes, and I was feeling romantic and excited about our upcoming nuptials. The front door was unlocked, which was unusual. Marcus was paranoid about security, especially with all the expensive art and antiques in the house. I called out as I entered, carrying the bags of food toward the kitchen. "Marcus, I brought lunch from Romano's." No answer. I figured he might be in his study with headphones on, as he sometimes did when reviewing property surveys. I made my way toward the back of the house, the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floors. That's when I heard it, a woman's voice, soft and intimate, coming from the direction of the master bedroom. My blood went cold. I set the lunch bags down on a side table and crept closer, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it could be heard throughout the house. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the crack I could see them. Marcus was sitting on the edge of our bed, the bed we'd picked out together, the bed where I'd imagined starting our married life. Elena was standing between his legs, her hands on his shoulders, and he was gently rubbing her visibly pregnant belly. "The baby's been moving so much today," Elena whispered, her voice filled with a tenderness I'd never heard before. "I think he knows his daddy's voice." Marcus leaned forward and kissed her stomach, his eyes closed in what looked like pure bliss. "I can't wait to meet him, mi amor. Our little family is going to be perfect." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Our little family. The casual endearment in Spanish. The obvious intimacy of the moment. How long has this been going on? I managed to make it back to the front door without being heard, grabbing the lunch bags on autopilot. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely start the car. I drove aimlessly through the Chicago suburbs for hours, my mind reeling with questions and implications. When I finally returned to my penthouse that evening, I found Marcus waiting for me with a bouquet of white roses, my favorite. He was wearing the charcoal gray suit I'd bought him for his birthday, looking every inch the successful businessman who'd swept me off my feet 3 years ago. "There's my beautiful bride-to-be," he said, pulling me into an embrace that now felt like a lie. "I missed you today. How were the vendors?" I pulled back to study his face, searching for any sign of guilt or deception. But Marcus had always been good at compartmentalizing, at presenting exactly the face he wanted the world to see. It was part of what made him so successful in business. "They were fine," I managed to say, my voice sounding strangely normal. "Everything's on track for the wedding." "Good, good. I know how much this means to you." He kissed my forehead, and I had to resist the urge to recoil. "I have some great news, actually. The Wisconsin project got approved for the second phase. We're going to be even more successful than we projected." Success, money, image. Had that been all our relationship was really about? I thought about Elena's gentle smile as she'd spoken about their baby, the way Marcus had looked at her with such genuine affection. When was the last time he'd looked at me that way? "That's wonderful," I said, extracting myself from his arms. "I'm pretty tired, though. Long day with the wedding planning." "Of course, you go rest. I'll order us something for dinner." As I headed toward the bedroom, I heard his phone buzz. He answered it quickly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Hi, beautiful. Yes, I'm free to talk now. She just went to lie down." I closed the bedroom door behind me and finally allowed myself to break down. The tears came in waves, carrying with them the weight of betrayal, humiliation, and the devastating realization that my perfect life had been built on a foundation of lies. But even as I cried, a small part of my mind was already beginning to strategize. Marcus Wellington had underestimated me if he thought I'd simply roll over and accept this betrayal. I hadn't built my career by being weak or naive, and I wasn't about to start now. The wedding was in 2 weeks. 400 guests, including Chicago's most influential business leaders, socialites, and media personalities. Marcus cared about his reputation and his standing in the community above all else. If he wanted to humiliate me, he'd chosen the wrong woman. Jamai Munel. I wiped my tears and began to plan. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I'd never done unless I was genuinely ill. Instead, I drove to a small private investigation firm in Lincoln Park that I'd researched online. The office was nondescript, located above a coffee shop on Clark Street, exactly the kind of place where discretion was valued above flashy marketing. Detective Sarah Chen was a former Chicago Police Department investigator who'd gone into private practice 5 years earlier. She was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Miss Sterling," she said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the client chairs across from her desk. "You mentioned on the phone that you need information about your fiancé. What exactly are you looking for?" I took a deep breath and laid out everything I'd witnessed, along with the months of suspicious behavior that had preceded it. Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. "How long do you think this affair has been going on?" she asked when I finished. "I'm not sure. Elena has been working for him for about a year, and she's clearly several months pregnant. The timing..." I trailed off, not wanting to voice the obvious conclusion. "I'll need photographs of both of them, information about their regular schedules, and any other details you can provide about their relationship. Also, I'll need to know what you're hoping to accomplish with this investigation." That was the question I'd been wrestling with all night. I want to know everything. How long it's been going on, whether there have been other women, what his financial situation really is, what his plans are for the future. "I want to know exactly who I've been planning to marry." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Smart approach. A lot of people in your situation just want to confirm the affair and then react emotionally. But information is power, especially in situations like this." "Exactly. And Sarah?" I leaned forward. "I want to be involved in this investigation. I want to know what you're doing and when you're doing it. This isn't just about catching them. It's about understanding the full scope of what I'm dealing with. Over the next week, Sarah and I worked together like a well-oiled machine. She taught me how to check Marcus's credit card statements online, how to track his phone's location using the family plan we shared, and how to document everything we discovered. I felt like a detective in a movie, except the stakes were my real life. What we found was worse than I'd imagined. The affair had been going on for 8 months, starting just 3 months after Elena began working for Marcus. Credit card records showed regular charges at upscale restaurants in neighborhoods where Marcus claimed to be working, always for 2 people. There were charges at a high-end maternity boutique, an obstetrician's office, and even a furniture store that specializes in nursery items. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Most damning of all, Sarah discovered that Marcus had been looking at houses in Lake Forest, an affluent suburb about an hour north of Chicago. He'd put earnest money down on a beautiful colonial-style home, with 5 bedrooms and a 3-car garage, the kind of house perfect for a young family. The closing date is scheduled for 3 weeks from now, Sarah informed me as we sat in her office reviewing the evidence. A week after your wedding date. The implications were staggering. Marcus had been planning to go through with our wedding, presumably for the sake of appearances and the business connections my family brought to the table, while simultaneously setting up a new life with Elena and their child. There's something else, Sarah continued, sliding another document across the desk. I had a contact run a background check on Elena Rodriguez. She's not just a housekeeper, Victoria. She has a business degree from Northwestern and previously worked as a financial analyst for Goldman Sachs. I stared at the document, my mind reeling. So she's not some naive young woman who got swept off her feet by her wealthy employer. She knew exactly what she was doing. It appears so. And there's more. According to my source at the bank, Marcus has been moving money around, setting up new accounts that aren't in his name. He's been liquidating some of his assets quietly over the past few months. The picture was becoming clear, and it was uglier than I'd ever imagined. Marcus wasn't just cheating on me. He was planning to disappear with Elena and their child, leaving me to deal with the social embarrassment and possibly financial fallout. But knowledge, as Sarah had said, was power. And I was about to become very powerful indeed. I need you to keep monitoring him, I told Sarah. But I also need you to help me with something else. I want to know everything about the wedding guests, who they are, what they represent, what their relationships are with Marcus. I'm going to need that information for what I'm planning to do next. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Which is? I smiled for the first time in over a week. I'm going to give Marcus Wellington exactly what he deserves. But first, I'm going to make him think he's gotten away with it. The next week was the most challenging acting job of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal, while sitting on information that made me physically ill. I attended our final dress fitting, confirmed details with the caterer, and smiled brightly at our rehearsal dinner, as if my world hadn't been turned upside down. Marcus seemed more relaxed than he'd been in months, probably because he thought his secret was safe. He was attentive and affectionate, playing the role of the devoted fiancé perfectly. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed he was genuinely excited about our wedding. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Chicago Athletic Association, a beautiful historic venue overlooking Millennium Park. 50 of our closest friends and family members toasted our upcoming marriage while I mentally cataloged which ones I'd be able to count on for support when the truth came out. My maid of honor, Jessica Lambert, was my oldest friend from college and the person I trusted most in the world. She'd been asking me if I was feeling okay all week, clearly sensing that something was wrong despite my attempts to appear normal. You seem tense, she whispered during the cocktail hour, pulling me aside near the windows overlooking the park. Are you having cold feet? It's totally normal if you are. I squeezed her hand. I'm fine, Jess. Just wedding nerves, you know how it is. But Jessica had known me too long to be fooled by my act. Victoria, we've been friends for 10 years. I know when you're lying to me. What's really going on? I wanted desperately to tell her everything, to have someone share the burden of what I knew. But I couldn't risk getting back to Marcus before I was ready to make my move. I promise I'll tell you everything soon, I said. But right now, I need you to trust me and help me get through this evening. Jessica studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but I'm here when you're ready to talk. The evening proceeded smoothly. with Marcus giving a speech about how lucky he was to have found me, and how excited he was to start our life together. I responded with my own speech about love, commitment, and the importance of honesty in marriage. Several people commented later that it was one of the most touching rehearsal dinners they'd ever attended. If only they knew. The night before the wedding, I received a text message from Sarah. Everything confirmed. Target is at the Lake Forest house, with the subject. Photos attached. Ready for tomorrow? I looked at the photos she'd sent. Marcus and Elena moving boxes into their new home, laughing together like any happy couple preparing for their future. Elena was wearing a flowing maternity dress that emphasized her growing belly, and Marcus had his arm around her waist possessively. Ready, I texted back. I spent that night in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house in Evanston, staring at the ceiling and running through my plan one more time. Everything had to be perfect. The timing, the execution, the aftermath, all of it had to be flawless. At 6 a.m, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice warm and intimate. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how in just a few hours, you're going to be my wife. I couldn't sleep either, I replied, which was true for entirely different reasons. I can't wait to see you at the altar. I love you so much, Victoria. I hope you know that. The audacity of the lie took my breath away. I love you too, Marcus. See you at the church. After I hung up, I sat in bed for a few minutes, letting the enormity of what I was about to do wash over me. Then I got up and began preparing for the most important performance of my life. The Palmer House ballroom had been transformed into a fairy tale setting. White roses and peonies adorned every surface, crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. It was everything I'd dreamed of for my wedding day, and it was all about to become a nightmare for Marcus Wellington. I stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by my bridesmaids as they put the finishing touches on my makeup and hair. The dress was a custom Vera Wang creation, ivory silk with intricate beadwork that had taken months to complete. I looked like a princess, which was exactly what I'd wanted. "You look absolutely radiant," my mother said, tears forming in her eyes. "Marcus is such a lucky man." "Thank you, Mom," I replied, checking my reflection one more time. Everything had to be perfect for what was about to happen. Jessica helped me with my veil, her hands gentle and steady. "Are you ready for this?" "More than ready," I said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "It's time." The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock, with cocktails and dinner to follow. I had specifically requested that the ceremony be held in the ballroom's main space, rather than a separate chapel, ensuring that all 400 guests would have a perfect view of everything that was about to unfold. At 3:45, I received a text from Sarah. "Package delivered. He's opening it now." I smiled, imagining Marcus's face as he opened the envelope I'd delivered to the groom's suite. Inside was a single photograph, the one Sarah had taken of him and Elena at their new house, along with a note, "Congratulations on your new family. Love, your devoted fiancé." My father appeared at the door to the bridal suite, looking distinguished in his black tuxedo. "Princess, it's time." We made our way to the back of the ballroom, where the processional would begin. I could hear the murmur of 400 guests settling into their seats, the gentle clink of champagne glasses, the excited whispers of people anticipating a beautiful ceremony. The music began, Pachelbel's canon in D, exactly as I'd planned. My bridesmaids began their walk down the aisle, each one looking elegant in their dusty rose gowns. Jessica was last, and she gave me an encouraging smile before stepping into the ballroom. "Ready, sweetheart?" my father asked, offering me his arm. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied. We stepped into the ballroom, and I could feel the collective intake of breath as the guests saw me. I'd planned this moment for 18 months, but it felt surreal now that it was actually happening. At the altar, Marcus stood waiting in his black tuxedo, but even from a distance, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight pallor of his face. He'd received my message. As we walked down the aisle, I made eye contact with key guests, business partners, socialites, members of the media who'd been invited to cover Chicago's wedding of the year. These people represented Marcus's professional and social world, and their opinions mattered to him more than anything else. My father handed me over to Marcus with the traditional words. Her mother and I do. Marcus took my hands, and I could feel them trembling slightly. Up close, I could see the perspiration on his forehead, the uncertainty in his eyes. You look beautiful, he whispered, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Thank you, I replied, my voice steady and clear. You look exactly like yourself. The officiant, Reverend Thomas Mitchell, began the ceremony with the traditional opening. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Victoria Sterling and Marcus Wellington in holy matrimony. As he continued with the preamble, I watched Marcus's face. He was trying to maintain his composure, but I could see the war going on behind his eyes. He kept glancing toward the back of the ballroom as if expecting something to happen. If anyone has just cause why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace, Reverend Mitchell intoned. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The ballroom fell silent, 400 people holding their breath in anticipation of the vows that would follow. Instead, I stepped forward and turned to face the assembled guests. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's excellent acoustics. I have something to say. A murmur ran through the crowd. This wasn't part of the traditional ceremony, and people were clearly confused. Marcus reached for my arm, but I stepped away from him. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, I want to thank you all for being here today to witness what was supposed to be the beginning of my marriage to Marcus Wellington. Unfortunately, I've recently discovered that Marcus has been living a double life. The murmur grew louder. I could see people sitting up straighter in their seats, their attention completely focused on me now. Marcus, I said, turning to face him directly, would you like to tell our guests about Elena Rodriguez and the baby you're expecting together? Or would you prefer that I do it? The color drained completely from Marcus's face. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Behind him, I could see his groomsmen, his brother David, his business partner Jonathan, and his college roommate Michael, staring at him in shock. I see, I continued, turning back to the guests. Well, then I'll handle it. For the past 8 months, my fiancé has been having an affair with his housekeeper, who is currently 6 months pregnant with his child. While I've been planning our wedding, he's been planning a new life with another woman. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. I could see phones being discreetly pulled out as people began recording what was clearly going to be the social event of the year, for entirely different reasons than anyone had expected. Marcus had planned to go through with our wedding today, presumably for the sake of appearances and the business connections my family brings to his real estate empire. After our honeymoon, he intended to quietly move to Lake Forest with Elena and their child, leaving me to discover his deception gradually. I reached into my bouquet and pulled out a manila envelope. I have photographs, financial records, and documentation of everything I've just described. I've also learned that Marcus has been liquidating assets and moving money into accounts that aren't in his name. I can only assume he was planning to disappear with as much of his wealth as possible. Marcus finally found his voice. Victoria, please, let me explain. Explain? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. What exactly would you like to explain, Marcus? How long have you been lying to me? How have you been planning to humiliate me publicly while secretly starting a new family? How have you been stealing from your own business to fund your escape plan? The last accusation wasn't entirely true, but I could see from his reaction that it hit close to home. His face went from pale to red, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. You have no idea what you're talking about, he said, his voice shaking with anger. You're making wild accusations based on… Based on what? I interrupted. Based on the photographs I had taken of you and Elena at your new house in Lake Forest. Based on the financial records showing you've been funding her medical expenses and preparing a nursery. Based on the fact that you've been lying to me for months. I could see Jessica in the front row, her hands covering her mouth in shock. My parents looked devastated but proud. They'd raised me to be strong, and I was showing them exactly how strong I could be. Marcus Wellington, I said, my voice ringing with authority, you are a liar, a cheat, and a coward. You thought you could manipulate me, use me, and discard me when it was convenient for you. But you underestimated me. I began removing my jewelry. The diamond engagement ring, the pearl necklace that had been his grandmother's, the tennis bracelet he'd given me for my last birthday. I placed each piece on the altar table next to us. I will not be marrying you today. or any other day. But I want you to know that you haven't won. You haven't outsmarted me or gotten away with anything. I know exactly who you are now, and more importantly, so does everyone else. I gestured to the assembled guests, many of whom were now openly staring at Marcus with expressions of disgust and disappointment. These were the people whose opinions mattered most to him, and I just systematically destroyed his reputation in front of all of them. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, addressing the crowd one final time, I apologize for the deception, but I felt it was important for everyone to understand the true character of the man they've known as Marcus Wellington. The reception will still be held as planned. I've paid for it, and I see no reason to waste good food and champagne. Please consider it a celebration of honesty and integrity triumphing over deception and betrayal. I turned to Marcus one last time. He was standing frozen at the altar, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The confident, successful businessman who'd swept me off my feet was gone, replaced by a man who looked small and pathetic in his expensive tuxedo. "Goodbye, Marcus," I said quietly. "I hope Elena and your child bring you the happiness you were looking for. You're certainly not going to find it anywhere else after today." With that, I turned and walked back down the aisle, my head held high and my back straight. The guests parted like the Red Sea, some of them beginning to applaud as I passed. By the time I reached the back of the ballroom, the applause had grown to a thunderous ovation. I had done it. I had exposed Marcus Wellington for exactly what he was, in front of everyone who mattered to him. But more importantly, I had shown myself, and everyone else, that I was not a victim. I was a woman who refused to be broken by betrayal. The real celebration was just beginning. The hours following my wedding day revelation were a whirlwind of activity. While I changed out of my wedding dress and into a stunning red cocktail dress I'd secretly purchased for the occasion, word of what had happened spread through Chicago's social circles like wildfire. Jessica found me in the bridal suite as I was touching up my makeup. "Victoria, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "I'm perfect," I replied, and for the first time in weeks I meant it. "But I need you to do something for me. I need you to make sure Marcus doesn't leave the hotel. I'm not done with him yet." "What do you mean?" I smiled at her through the mirror. "He's going to want to slink away and hide, probably run straight to Elena. But I have one more conversation I need to have with him, and it needs to happen tonight." Jessica nodded, understanding immediately. "I'll handle it. David and Jonathan are with him now. They're both furious. I don't think he's going anywhere soon." The reception was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Instead of the subdued, embarrassed gathering I might have expected, it had transformed into something resembling a victory party. People were coming up to me constantly, congratulating me on my courage, sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery, and expressing their admiration for how I'd handled the situation. "Victoria Sterling," said Margaret Harrison, the society columnist for the Chicago Tribune, as she approached me during the cocktail hour. "That was the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed. You've got steel in your spine, girl." "Thank you, Margaret. I hope you'll be accurate in whatever you write about today." "Oh, honey, I'm going to write exactly what I saw. A strong woman who refused to be played for a fool. Marcus Wellington's reputation in this city is finished, and rightfully so." Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. Business leaders who'd worked with Marcus expressed their shock and disappointment. Several women shared their own experiences with unfaithful partners and thanked me for showing them what standing up for yourself looked like. But the most satisfying moment came around 8 o'clock, when Marcus finally appeared in the ballroom. He'd changed out of his tuxedo into a regular suit, and he looked haggard, defeated. His brother David and his business partner Jonathan flanked him, both looking grim. He spotted me across the room and began walking in my direction. Conversations stopped as people noticed his approach, and I could feel the entire room's attention focusing on us. "Victoria," he said when he reached me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, can we talk privately?" "I think we're past private conversations, don't you?" I replied, making no effort to lower my voice. "After all, you've been having private conversations with Elena for months. How did that work out for you?" "Please," he said, and I could see desperation in his eyes. "I know I made mistakes, but..." Mistakes? I laughed, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. Marcus, you didn't make mistakes. You made calculated decisions to lie to me, cheat on me, and plan to abandon me. Those aren't mistakes. Those are choices. He looked around at the watching faces, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of our conversation. Can't we go somewhere else to discuss this? No, I said firmly. You wanted to humiliate me publicly by going through with our wedding while secretly planning a life with another woman. Now you get to experience what public humiliation feels like. I took a step closer to him, close enough that only he could hear my next words. But since you asked so nicely, I'll give you one chance to explain yourself. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. Tell me why you did what you did. Marcus glanced around again, clearly realizing that he had no choice but to engage with me on my terms. I fell in love with Elena. I didn't plan for it to happen, but it did. And when she got pregnant, I felt responsible. Responsible? I interrupted. That's interesting. Did you feel responsible to me when you were planning our wedding while sleeping with another woman? Did you feel responsible when you were looking at houses for your new family while I was picking out flowers for our reception? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said, my voice growing stronger. You're a coward, Marcus. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted my family's money and social connections, but you also wanted your young girlfriend and your baby. You thought you could manipulate both of us and get away with it. People had begun gathering around us now, not even pretending to have other conversations. This was the main event, and everyone knew it. You're right, Marcus said suddenly, his voice breaking. You're absolutely right. I was a coward. I was selfish and dishonest, and I hurt you in the worst possible way. I'm sorry, Victoria. I'm so sorry. The apology hung in the air between us. I'd been waiting for this moment, imagining how it would feel to hear him admit his guilt and beg for my forgiveness. But now that it was happening, I felt nothing but emptiness. You're sorry, I repeated. Do you know what I'm sorry about, Marcus? I'm sorry that I wasted 3 years of my life on someone who was capable of this level of deception. I'm sorry that I ignored the red flags, because I was so invested in the fantasy of who I thought you were. And I'm sorry that Elena and your child will have to grow up knowing that their father is the kind of man who would do what you did. Marcus's face crumpled. Please, Victoria. I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance you could forgive me? Any chance we could work this out? The question was so absurd that I actually laughed. Work this out? Marcus, you're having a baby with another woman. You've been lying to me for months. You've damaged both of our reputations and destroyed the trust of everyone who knows you. What exactly would we be working out? I could end things with Elena, he said desperately. I could make this right. I could— Stop, I said, holding up my hand. Just stop. You think this is about Elena? You think if you abandoned her and your child, that would somehow make me want you back? That would make you a good person? I looked around at the faces surrounding us, seeing a mixture of fascination, horror, and approval in their expressions. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you all to witness this moment. This is Marcus Wellington, a man who is now offering to abandon his pregnant girlfriend and unborn child to try to win back the woman he betrayed. This is the character of the man you've all known and done business with. Marcus's face went ashen as he realized the implications of what he'd just said in front of Chicago's business and social elite. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant, I replied. You're so desperate to salvage this situation that you're willing to destroy anyone who gets in your way. Elena, your child, me, we're all just collateral damage in your efforts to protect your reputation and your business interests. I took one final step closer to him, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus. You're going to leave this hotel and go home to Elena. You're going to be the best father you can be to that child, because that innocent baby deserves better than you, but at least deserves your support. And you're going to live with the consequences of your choices for the rest of your life. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. But more importantly, you're going to remember this moment for the rest of your life. You're going to remember the day you learned that actions have consequences, and that some women refuse to be victims of your selfishness. With that, I turned and walked away from Marcus Wellington for the last time. I didn't look back, didn't acknowledge his desperate calls of my name. I'd said everything I needed to say, and more importantly, I'd done everything I needed to do. The crowd parted as I walked through them, and I could hear the immediate buzz of conversation that erupted behind me. This would be the story that defined Marcus Wellington for the rest of his life in Chicago. Every business deal, every social interaction, every attempt to rebuild his reputation would be overshadowed by this moment. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office overlooking the Chicago River, reviewing the final contracts for my own marketing consultancy. After the wedding disaster, I decided to leave Henderson and Associates and strike out on my own. Surprisingly, several of Marcus's former business associates had reached out, offering to hire my services. It seemed that my handling of the situation had earned me a reputation for integrity and strength that was valuable in the business world. "Victoria?" My assistant, Amanda, knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." I looked up from my contracts, curious. Did she give her name? Elena Rodriguez. I felt my stomach clench involuntarily. In the 3 months since the wedding, I'd heard updates through the Chicago social network. Marcus had indeed gone back to Elena, and they'd gotten married in a small ceremony 2 weeks after what should have been our wedding day. The baby had been born, a healthy boy they'd named Gabriel. Marcus had tried to rebuild his business, but several major clients had dropped him, and his reputation in the city was permanently damaged. "Send her in," I said, steeling myself for whatever this conversation might bring. Elena entered my office looking tired but determined. She was clearly still recovering from childbirth, and she carried herself with the careful movements of a new mother. But there was something different about her, a strength I hadn't noticed before. "Victoria," she said, taking the seat across from my desk, "thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected." "That's one way to put it," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Congratulations on your son." "Thank you." Elena's hands twisted in her lap. "I wanted to come here to apologize to you. And to thank you." "Apologize and thank me?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting combination." Elena took a deep breath. "I need to apologize for my part in what happened to you. I knew Marcus was engaged when we started our relationship. I told myself that it was just physical, that it didn't mean anything, but I was lying to myself. I was selfish and wrong, and I contributed to the pain you went through." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but she seemed genuinely remorseful. "And the thanks?" "For showing me exactly who Marcus really is," Elena said, her voice growing stronger. "What you did at the wedding. It was brutal and public and humiliating, but it was also honest. You showed everyone, including me, that Marcus is a man who will lie and manipulate to get what he wants, regardless of who gets hurt." This was not the conversation I'd expected to have. "I'm not sure I understand." Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, similar to the one I'd used at the wedding. 2 weeks ago, I found these in Marcus's home office. He's been having an affair with his new secretary, a woman named Jennifer Walsh. She's 23 years old, and according to these emails, she's been helping him embezzle money from his clients to fund his gambling habit. I stared at the envelope, feeling a mixture of vindication and disgust. "He's already cheating on you?" "With the same pattern," Elena confirmed. "Secret meetings, lies about working late, mysterious phone calls. The only difference is that now I know what to look for, thanks to you." "What are you gonna do?" Elena's jaw tightened with resolve. "I'm leaving him. I've already consulted with a divorce attorney, and I'm taking Gabriel with me. I'm also turning over this evidence to the authorities, because what he's doing to his clients is criminal." I felt a surge of respect for the woman sitting across from me. That takes courage. "I learned from the best," Elena said with a slight smile. "Watching you stand up to him at the wedding, seeing how you refused to be his victim, it showed me that I didn't have to be his victim either." We sat in silence for a moment, two women who'd been deceived by the same man, now finding common ground in our refusal to accept his treatment. "There's something else," Elena said. "I wanted you to know that I never intended for things to go as far as they did. When I first started working for Marcus, I was in a very difficult financial situation. My mother needed medical care, and I was desperate for a job that paid well. When Marcus started paying attention to me, I thought it was genuine affection. I didn't realize until much later that I was just another conquest to him. "You don't owe me your story," I said, but not unkindly. "I think I do," Elena replied, "because I want you to know that what you did at the wedding didn't just expose Marcus. It saved me from making an even bigger mistake. If you hadn't shown me his true character, I might have spent years believing his lies, letting him destroy my life piece by piece." Elena stood up, smoothing down her dress. "I'll be testifying against him in the embezzlement case. I wanted to give you a heads up, in case the media tries to contact you for comment." "Thank you," I said, standing as well. "And Elena, I hope you and Gabriel find happiness. Real happiness, not the fake version Marcus was selling." "We will," Elena said with certainty. "I'm moving back to California to be near my family. I'm going to finish my business degree and start over. Gabriel deserves a mother who's strong enough to protect him from men like his father." After Elena left, I sat alone in my office, processing our conversation. In a strange way, it felt like the final chapter of my ordeal with Marcus Wellington. Not only had I escaped his deception, but I'd inadvertently helped another woman escape as well. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Jessica. "Victoria, have you seen the news?" "What news?" "Marcus Wellington was just arrested for embezzlement and fraud. It's all over the local stations. They're saying he stole over $2 million from his clients." I closed my eyes, feeling a sense of poetic justice. I heard he might be having some legal troubles. "This is incredible," Jessica continued. "First the wedding disaster, now this. His life is completely falling apart." "Good," I said, and I meant it. He deserves everything that's happening to him. "Are you okay? I know this must bring up a lot of emotions." I looked out my office window at the Chicago River, watching the boats navigate the water with purpose and direction. "I'm better than okay, Jess. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." I was featured on the cover of Chicago Business Weekly with the headline, "Rising Phoenix: How Victoria Sterling Built an Empire from Betrayal." The article detailed how my consulting firm had grown to represent some of the city's most prestigious companies, and how my reputation for integrity and strength had made me one of the most sought-after business advisors in the Midwest. The reporter had asked me about the wedding incident, of course. Everyone still wanted to know about that day, and how it had affected my life. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me," I'd told her. "Marcus Wellington thought he was destroying me, but he actually set me free. He showed me that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, and that I didn't need anyone else to validate my worth." Marcus had been sentenced to 5 years in prison for embezzlement. His real estate empire had collapsed, and he'd lost everything: his money, his reputation, his family. Elena had successfully divorced him and moved to California with Gabriel. According to mutual friends, she was thriving, working as a financial consultant and raising her son as a single mother. I'd started dating again, but carefully and on my own terms. I'd learned the warning signs of deception, and I developed a zero-tolerance policy for dishonesty in any form. The man I was currently seeing, Dr. Richard Chen, Sarah's cousin as it turned out, was a pediatric surgeon who valued honesty and integrity above all else. We'd been taking things slowly, building a foundation of trust and respect. On the anniversary of what would have been my wedding day, I threw a party. Not a bitter, vengeful celebration, but a genuine party to celebrate the life I'd built for myself in the years since I'd walked away from Marcus Wellington. I invited all the people who'd supported me through the ordeal: Jessica, my parents, my new business associates, and even Sarah, who'd become a close friend. "A toast," I said, raising my champagne glass to the assembled group, "to the day I learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is also the best thing that can happen to you. To discover that you're stronger than you thought, braver than you believed, and more valuable than anyone else's opinion of you." The guests raised their glasses, and I felt a sense of completion that I'd never experienced before. I'd gone through the fire of betrayal and emerged not just intact, but transformed. I was no longer the woman who'd been planning a wedding to a man who didn't deserve her. I was Victoria Sterling, business owner, survivor, and someone who refused to be anyone's victim. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Jessica pulled me aside. "I'm so proud of you," she said, hugging me tightly. "A year ago, you were devastated and heartbroken. Look at you now. You're absolutely glowing." "I feel like I'm finally living my real life," I replied. "Not the life I thought I was supposed to have, but the life I actually chose for myself." "Any regrets?" Jessica asked. I thought about the question seriously. Did I regret the pain I'd experienced? Public humiliation? The months of planning a wedding that would never happen? The 3 years I'd spent with a man who'd been lying to me? None, I said finally. Not a single one. Because all of it led me to where I am now, and I wouldn't trade this version of my life for anything. As I looked around at my new home, a beautiful condo I'd purchased with the money from my thriving business, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Not for Marcus Wellington or the pain he'd caused me, but for my own strength in responding to that pain. I'd chosen to fight back rather than fade away, to build something new rather than mourn what was lost. The girl who'd stood at that altar in her perfect dress, about to marry the wrong man, was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who demanded honesty and respect, and who would never again allow anyone to diminish her value. I'd made Marcus Wellington beg for forgiveness, but more importantly, I'd made myself into someone who would never need to beg anyone for anything ever again. I was complete, successful, and happy, not because of a man, but because of my own choices and my own strength. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.